You know when you bump into someone in public, someone that you knew in the past, like someone you went to school or work with, and you have a really lovely conversation that dips into earnest nostalgia, and the moment naturally draws to a close. But then suddenly the moment is artificially dragged on because the other person is trying to talk about a previously discussed topic, which then awkwardly drags out the entire encounter in a completely inappropriate way. Well, somehow Dark Phoenix is the bizarre filmic equivalent to this, because every creative and business decision made are insanely self-defeating. It's supposed to be a new start, but not really, because it's readapting a story that was badly interpreted 13 years ago, so it's something that's immediately already artistically and commercially stale. It's about new characters, but the selling points are still the performances of James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, and Jennifer Lawrence, so they're still narratively instrumental figures, but are now treated less thoughtfully. It's trying to move beyond the old themes of identity and inequality in order to enter more high-concept sci-fi genre stories, but those old themes still motivates the characters, in a way that ultimately leads the whole topic becoming completely irrelevant to the events of the current story. Characters wear brighter, Frank Quietly styled costumes, and yet the story is more bleak and misanthropic. It's also building on the established characters and world from X-Men Apocalypse, and yet it doesn't, because the Phoenix was previously presented as a power inside Jean Grey, but now suddenly it's presented as an alien outside force, despite both movies written by the same person. Overall, just like that conversation you have with that awkward friend, the only outcome is an awkward abrupt end where you don't really know what the hell just happened. And you're kinda like, what?
Charles? He's the president.
Rocks?
What kind of adjustments?
Scaffolding.
Well, right off the back, this is an awkward case of the movie being so incredibly unnecessary by nature that it disrupts the credibility of the entire franchise, because previously the series had 3 respectable endings. You could have ended the entire franchise with Days of Future Past respectfully, since it left space for your imagination to go wild, while also providing the original characters their happy endings by retconning Brett Ratner and Tom Rothman's bowel movements. X-Men Apocalypse left a few dangling threads, but it also went full circle. The new prequel characters met Logan, young Charles and Eric exchanged the final lines from their original counterparts, but now they're exchanging it under the context of being friends rather than rivals.
I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul that comes to my school looking for trouble.
That in itself, I think, gave a bittersweet and yet optimistic emotional finality that would have been a respectful bow of sorts. And even though Logan was centered on Wolverine, it gave a dignifying end to the world he helped introduce us to. But nope, now we have this strangely miserable cliffhanger as the ending to one of the longest franchises ever. Even though they had to go back and reshoot the entire 3rd act, they didn't go back to change the ending. Number 1, Jessica Chastain looks drunk and tired.
I told you they could never understand you.
Number 2, the pacing is too quick. Okay, this is evident that way too much of the movie was clearly cut out, because events such as having Mystique's funeral immediately after her death just doesn't flow. Mystique isn't just some rando, she's been established as a national hero and a respected cultural and political figure.
But she has become the symbol of a new age.
She's my hero. I want to be like her.
You'd think Xavier would take the advantage to hold a large collective funeral where humans and mutants can mourn together, hopefully building new solidarities, but nope, it's just used to give the characters a change in motivations, and for Jennifer Lawrence to finally get out of this franchise that she clearly hates. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, you need to face this!
Number 3, there's a lack of proper world building. As a result, it suffers from the connect the dots syndrome, which goes back to why the pacing kind of feels off. The narrative causality feels weird because there's a gap between the characters and the world they inhabit, so you have to exert yourself more to compensate the lack of attention to immerse yourself in the drama, which kind of goes back to point number 2. Number 4, Magneto being bad again feels tired. Even the movie knows it, and yet it relies on this cliche to keep the story going, so his actions feel incredibly artistically dishonest.
The girl dies.
Number 5, it doesn't offer a good argument against Xavier, so it's frustrating to see the movie stack against him so unfairly.
You should understand better than anyone that we're only ever one bad day away from them starting to see us as the enemy again.
So what? We wear matching costumes and smile in pictures
That
to
is
make
a
everyone
small
feel
price
safe?
to pay for keeping the peace.
By risking our people to save theirs.
Yes, yes!
This scene with Mystique is the ultimate example of how unfair the story is written, because she totally comes off just ignorant and selfish. Oh, you don't like how you risked your life.
Put us in danger, Charles. You put those kids in danger.
Fool, you've seen how the Russians and Americans were willing to kill all mutants with missiles. Your friends were unfairly experimented on to death by government-sanctioned experiments. You've seen the government drafts mutants into the Vietnam War. You've seen Stryker experimenting on Logan. You've seen Apocalypse destroy the world in the last movie, killing millions of people. And as the audience, we've seen Days of Future Past and Logan, where mutants are eradicated due to human interference. I know mutant lives is a sensitive matter for Mystique, but there's gotta be a way to show her disenchantment without making her look so incompetent and immature, because now it just looks like everyone is bullying Charles.
This whole time we've been trying to protect these kids from the world when really we should have been protecting them from you.
Jean was never the villain. I was.
And then the scene happens.
Word coming late tonight that Congress is considering temporary mutant internment facilities for those whose powers have been deemed a clear and present danger to human citizens.
This only serves to show that Charles was right. Number 6, the ending is unfair. I don't understand. What does this ending even mean? Is Xavier kicked out of his own house and job? Is renaming the school to Jean Grey a permanent thing or just a temporary honor? I don't understand.
How's retirement treating you?
Are you telling me everyone was okay with stealing Charles's house money and political framework, not to mention his entire identity that was built on decades of suffering? Because why would Charles just sit around wearing a cheap polo shirt and sit on a terrible looking wheelchair if he still has money? Is he homeless? I don't get it. I mean, it's cool that like Eric shows up, but I mean, what?
Long time ago, you saved my life. And you offered me home. I'd like to do the same for you.
Okay, I didn't hate Dark Phoenix. It's not the worst film I've ever seen. It's boring for most people, but it didn't negatively test my patience.
Better than okay. God, I feel great. I do.
Simply seeing X-Men in space was unbelievably dramatically provocative, because this franchise was born out of the awkward phase of superhero cinema, and now it seemed to have finally left it. I love James McAvoy, I love Michael Fassbender, so the novelty of seeing them playing these characters one more time is absolutely fantastic. And compared to X-Men Apocalypse, the movie is way more tonally cohesive. It's not trying to be a coming-of-age teen movie mixed with a disaster movie, mixed with dark themes of revenge and tragedy, mixed with superhero goofy action, mixed with historical world building, mixed with interpersonal dramas and revelations, mixed with time travel retreads. This time it boils it down to a smaller scale story about revenge, trauma and narcissism. So I think it totally works tonally well under the theme of human suffering, so ironically that made it a little bit more entertaining.
Come on, that's not fair.
Okay, so what I can gather is that the central theme is trauma. Xavier's suppression of Jean Grey's childhood trauma suffocates the wound, and arguably suffocates his own X-Men with his dream. Therefore, this happiness and stability is ultimately all a facade, as fragile as tinfoil over a moldy sandwich. But what damages the cohesiveness of the theme is that the scale and scope doesn't correspond with each other in any way. The story pursues a smaller scale conflict about revenge and failure, but the scope has been made much bigger by the inclusion of aliens and intergalactic consequences. So despite the movie being more tonally cohesive now, it's more thematically confused because it runs into this huge obstacle where the characters just don't completely know what the full extent of the situation is, which creates a gap between the audience and the characters. Did everyone even find out that none of this was Xavier's fault? Because we know that Jean didn't kill Mystique because she was lied to, she was influenced by an alien force. How come the impact of having encountered aliens doesn't affect anyone? This life-changing event literally doesn't leave any impression at all. So it's an odd case of a big story with small ideas and therefore an even smaller discussion. This all could have worked if the movie went all the way with the sci-fi genre and broadened the existential boundaries. Jessica Chastain sees the human race from the outside side, and so does her character, so she sees Jean Grey's suppression of her inner power due to society's push of equality and tolerance as a negative force. Perhaps this is how you could critique Xavier. Is his dream of equal treatment ignorant, ultimately, since it means subduing people's individuality, therefore this whole facade suffers an entire civilization negatively? Because apart from Apocalypse, this is the first X-Men movie where humans and mutants are living peacefully together.
Now, I know that some of you choose to call us superheroes. I must confess I don't really know what that word means, but it is a damn sight better than what you used to call us.
It could have been a fun high-concept philosophical debate between Xavier and Jessica Chastain, where Jean is the thematic avatar, having to experience both sides of the argument. So, in the end, when she transcends beyond it, we realize that this is a question that we'll never know, or something like that. In other words, strive for bigger questions to support the bigger story. I feel kinda bad bashing this movie because I think Simon Kinberg genuinely tried. He wants to redeem himself. The filmmaking is kinda fun, there's a sense of style to the whole ordeal, even though I can't see what the hell is going on in shots like this. But at the same time, it feels so unenthusiastic, out of date, and constipated. It's a franchise trying to have a renaissance, but lacked the firm creative foundations to do so and made all the dumb decisions. Therefore, I can't help but tilt my head like a confused dog when I look at this movie. Like, what is this? It's so weird.